How you doing, family? So, one of my younger friends, Walt, asked me to make a video log, a vlog. I normally prefer to write, as most of my friends and family know. I write a lot, short essays, commentary, but he said it might be better for me to do a video log on some of my thoughts in regards to the protests and the riots. He said I need to give some type of credentials. I don't understand the credentials thing, but I guess you got to show you're qualified to speak outside of just being black. I don't know what are appropriate credentials. My name is Graylin C. Kimbrough. I'm 36 years old. I have a baccalaureate degree in Africana Studies, a master's degree in public administration, and I've been in law enforcement for 14 years, both local and federal law enforcement. But the only credential that's actually important to me is that I'm a married father of 3. I have a 14-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 7-year-old. Girl, and the baby's a boy. But he's massive. Absolutely massive kid. Incredible. All 3 of them. 3 beautiful black kids that mean everything to me. I don't know where to start. The marches and the protests aren't about George Floyd. The marches and the protests are about Samuel DuBose, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Walter Scott, Terrence Crutcher, Tamir Rice, Laquan McDonald. You know, that list goes on forever, right? But they're not even about the homicides, the police shootings. Because they're also about Rodney King. They're about police brutality. And there's more people who have experiences with negative interaction with police that didn't end up in homicide than anything else. But what if I told you they're not actually about the police exclusively? The thing is, the police are the physical representation of all the institutional issues that black folk deal with. And there's no other way to address or redress those considerations with those institutions that we see. So people are protesting the most visual representation of those institutions that they have issues with. That is the police. The thing is, what I was trying to figure out is, like, why are police chiefs just now making videos and walking with the citizens, protesting with the citizens, like all over the place now? Where you been? I worked the streets. I got out on foot on a regular basis. But of course I wasn't a police chief. I've been blessed to obtain a little bit of rank in the federal level, but where you been? Like, that's community-oriented policing. It's as though there's a riot or a protest that requires everybody to start actively engaging in the communities. It's kind of frustrating and unnecessary. The thing is, when you don't see color, you don't see the things that color our experience. You don't understand our issues. And I'm going to go back to that physical representation of the government institutions that have presented a problem. You know, it's interesting. I'm college educated, and you know that black people default on student loans at 5 times the rate of our white counterparts. It's our issues that we experience in the workplace. It's the passive-aggressive nature. It's the statements that, you know what? You seem angry. You're an angry black man. You're an angry black woman. Why is your posture like that? How come folks trouble pronouncing our names? It's the fact that for some reason you always get excluded and you can't really figure out why. It's that you work twice as hard, put in twice as many hours, and don't get the same promotions. You got to do 4 times as much to get half as far. But you can't protest the government about that. But you could protest police about that. It's those types of issues. Both my parents are retired Navy veterans. My mother, absolutely amazing woman. She did 24 years in the Navy, and she retired as an E8. And the stories that she tells me about her experiences in the military hurt my heart. It hurt my heart. How difficult it was for her to be a black female ascending. You know, my mother, she got her master's degree last year. She's a civilian employee now. And she still talks about the racism that she deals with at work. 24 years in the Navy, a retired vet with a master's degree, she still deals with it. And it's interesting, you talk about Kaepernick and how he's degrading the flag. It seems like most black vets don't share that sentiment. It's almost like there's 2 flags. There's a flag that black folk have an opinion of, a sentiment about, and then there's this other flag that everybody else seems to have their own definition and understanding of. Like, the violations of the flag seem to only apply to black people, but the flag clothing, that's not a violation. It's really, really interesting kind of how that works out. But black people can't protest the military. Like, there's no way to do that. You know, you can't protest some of these establishments. So what do black people do? They protest the police because it's the physical representation of the government, the most visual representation of the government. You've seen the health disparities with black people, right? How many more black people are affected by coronavirus in proportion to our percentage of the population, and how many more are dying? You know why that is, right? It's the health disparities, access to medical care, medical insurance. What most people don't know is that mental health is a major issue in the black community also. And if we didn't have these health disparities, maybe some of these mental health issues might be addressed as well. There's a cultural dynamic to it, but there's a access to medicine. But we can't protest the medical access. We can't protest the issues we're having access in these formats, these institutions. So we protest the most visual representation of these police brutality. It's all of these things. You know, it's our political and religious establishments that have let us down. You know, recently Jerry Falwell made a statement. This is the Jerry Falwell Jr., excuse me, no disrespect, Jerry Falwell Jr. Made a statement. He's the president of Liberty University. He made a statement that he wouldn't wear a mask unless it had a picture of Governor Northam in blackface. There's a controversy about Governor Northam in blackface last year. But Falwell Jr. was missing from that conversation. So he's got an issue with blackface? He didn't talk about it very much last year. I'm struggling seeing as strong a statement about that. But he would use racism against us. He would use racism against us in order to advance that cause. A political cause about masks. So you're going to insult us and continue to be racist in order to get back at the governor about something that was racist? So you didn't really care about the racism. You cared more about the politics. That's the issue with the religious establishment. Liberty University is a religious university. our politicians, our president, Donald Trump. I talked about the connotations associated with his tweets a couple days ago. Thug. We know the connotation, the euphemism behind that. We know what the context was when the looting starts. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. We know what that harkened to. The segregation era. But I think one of the things that really stuck out to me about that was his statement today that Antifa is being put on the terrorist watch list, or it's going to be cited as a terrorist organization. I don't really have an issue with that whatsoever. But from all the intel, they also talked about white supremacist groups. I don't understand why he's not putting those on terrorist organizations list. He's always struggled discussing white supremacists and white supremacy and the alt-right. Those are always the very good people on both sides. I don't understand why that's been such an issue. So to deflect away from talking about the white supremacists, the far right, we're just going to just only talk about Antifa. I got no problem with talking about Antifa. But Antifa's never called me the N-word. White supremacists have. Antifa's not the reason we have health disparities. A white supremacist system is. But we don't want to discuss those issues, so we're going to make it about something else. Black people can't protest those religious institutions and politicians in a real concrete way. So we protest the physical representation of government, the most visual representation, police and police brutality. That we can see. That we can get at. It's interesting how that works out, isn't it? When the president called for MAGA night last night, it was interesting because one of the things that I realized was MAGA was no longer a slogan, it was a movement. And by default, he was calling in his own personal protection detail. You know how that would have ended up? The right wing, which is traditionally armed, against these protesters. That was messy, scary, and dangerous. You know, speaking of which, one of the things that I realized our government failed at is protecting our First Amendment right. Freedom of speech, our ability to gather. The reason I say they failed these last few days. The government failed because they did not prevent white supremacists from infiltrating. They allowed provocateurs to come in and prevent us from demonstrating. It's smooth how that worked out, right? It's real smooth how that worked out. I like that. That was a real smooth move on them. Just, hey, we don't know what to do about these provocateurs, these white supremacists or Antifa on this side. Like, what do we... So you allow them to disrupt our ability to exercise our First Amendment. And the craziest thing is, it was beautiful seeing folk demonstrate their Second Amendment, was about a month ago. Black folk can't exercise their Second Amendment alongside their First Amendment for the same reason. If you have a large group of armed black people who show up, I'm not even going to talk about Governor Ronald Reagan and how the NRA got together to prevent and limit gun ownership in California while he was, should I say, limit gun access that was based on black people in California. I'm not going to get into that. What I'm talking about is the provocateurs. How difficult would it be for one of these provocateurs to shoot a gun behind this group of black people or shoot a cop from behind them? You know what happens then? Kent State all over again. Black people can't exercise their Second Amendment the same way everybody else does. We can't even exercise our First Amendment the same way. So what do? We try and protest the most visual representation of government, police, and police brutality. Because the thing is, even when the government is forced to acknowledge that there's an issue, they won't say white supremacy. They're going to push it off on something else. And now it's Antifa. Because we can't discuss race and racism. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me the most in like the last day or so is watching Black folk run online and talk out loud about they have to condemn. We feel compelled to condemn the looters. We're not looting. We're not looting. People who aren't looting, they're in their house, feel compelled to condemn looters. But Americans, by and large, don't feel compelled to condemn racism. Why is that? Why do we feel so compelled to condemn looters, but other people don't feel compelled to condemn racism? I can't really wrap my head around that one. It's because we have to maintain a certain image. We have to maintain a certain presentation. Like my braids and my locks, I just grew them. Because I became so infatuated with maintaining an image that was non-threatening to larger society. I've always been conscious of code switching. Code switching is in regards to your pattern of speech. So when I want to, I can speak in a more proper, what people would believe more dignified capacity, where the enunciation and pronunciation of my words is more specific. I know what to emphasize on certain words. This is by and large attached to the level of education that I've been able to sustain, but also because I've learned how to make people comfortable around me. Black people's hair has always been a problem. It's always been policed. You know, like we have issues with beards because of skin bumps. But institutions create policies that force us to shave anyway. Sometimes you can get away with it, sometimes you can't. So in a way, growing my hair has been a rejection of that. But I can't protest those institutions. Black people can't. So we protest the most visual representation of that, the police and police brutality. Thank you, George Floyd. Thank you for the sacrifice that you made. It's interesting, during no time period has America listened to us about what it is that we're saying. It's always after the fact. It's after the Civil War. It's after Jim Crow. It's after the crack era. Then all of a sudden, oh, we see what you black people were talking about now. I get it. I get it now. I get it now. Yeah, those policies were racist. I didn't see it then, but I can see it now. Listen to us now. We just, it's like we still have to convince you that stuff is racist. Like all lives matter. Have you ever been to a breast cancer march to raise funds and awareness for breast cancer? Did you ever see like people on the side holding up signs that said all cancers matter at a breast cancer march? You didn't see that? No, you didn't see that? No. Have you ever seen anybody say all cancers matter? No? But all cancers matter, right? Oh, because it's a deflection when you do it to take away from the topic at hand, which is breast cancer. So what if you hold like a parallel march for all cancers at the same time, as the breast cancer march. Yeah, it's still a deflection, isn't it? You want to take awareness away from the subject at hand. That's the same thing All Lives Matter does to Black Lives Matter. You're deflecting because you don't want the attention on Black Lives Matter and on Black issues. But we can't protest that expression of the First Amendment rights to the government. The government's not going to do anything about that. So we're protesting the most visual representation of government, the police in uniform and police brutality. One of the things, slight departure, that bothers me is when we have people who speak purposely as deflections. Candace Owens, and what's the other guy's name? I think it's like you got the Hodgkins twins, and what's the other one? He's a cop. He used to be a cop. Brandon Tantrum. That's what we call him, Brandon Tantrum. I think his last name is actually, I don't know, Brandon Tantrum. We're going with that. And what's interesting about this group is they're not Black. They're green. So what they've done is they've developed an economic platform based on their perceived Black skin, but their platforms are for white folk. They cater to white folk, and they spend no time with the Black community. They claim to speak on behalf of us, but they don't spend significant time with the Black community. It's interesting. And I will concede it is a brilliant economic strategy. You leverage perceived Blackness for green. It's brilliant. It's pathetic, but it's brilliant. Next week will end my law enforcement career. I'll end 14 years in law enforcement. Law enforcement's taken too much out of me. It's affected my health too much. And it's not the citizens. It's not the communities. It's the internal policies. It's the internal politics. It's taken everything out of me. And I have to be around for my family. I don't know what the next chapter of my life will look like. And that's okay. That's okay. It's okay because I'm like approximately 33 million other African Americans right now. We don't know what the next chapter in our life is going to look like. But that's nothing new for us. Uncertainty is nothing new for us. Last thing. Well, I guess two things. Weekly, daily is like 9/11 for us. With the stuff that we see and the stuff that we experience. And it's hard for us. It's hard for us to be on Facebook, and while we're experiencing this stuff, these shootings, this stuff at work, to see everybody posting their new recipes, pictures of a bug they found. They're talking about freeing animals, and we got to become vegan to protect the animals. And free Tibet. It's like free everybody but us. Worry about everything else except for the plight of fellow so-called Americans. That's hard for us. That's callous. It's like you don't even notice or care about what's going on. Last thing I'm going to say, and I apologize for taking up so much of your time. Those folks that were out at the protests and the riots, this is new to you. Protesting is new to you. For Black people, every day that we wake up and that we get going and we go to these jobs. We deal with the racism to and from. Every day that we don't riot is a form of peaceful protest. Just getting up, just surviving is a form of peaceful protest every single day. I've been peacefully protesting for 36 years. My mother has been peacefully protesting for 57 years. Peace and blessings all.